New videos every day.
Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about eugenics. And during this video, I'm going to be asking 3 questions, and I really want you to answer these questions. So answer these questions. So first, we're going to define what eugenics is, and we're going to do this really simply and easily. So the basis of eugenics is you have 2 groups. You have the fit, and then you have the unfit. And you're dividing the population into those 2 groups. So the unfit group is the bad gene pool, and you do not want them to reproduce. And the fit group is the good gene pool, and you want them to reproduce. So you have positive eugenics and you have negative eugenics. In positive eugenics, you encourage the good gene pool to reproduce. And in negative eugenics, you discourage the bad gene pool from reproducing. So anything that would encourage the good gene pool to reproduce is positive eugenics, and anything that would discourage the bad gene pool from reproducing is negative eugenics. So a few examples of positive eugenics is prearranged marriages or tax deductions for people that are married and are considered fit people. So some examples of negative eugenics is forced sterilization, euthanasia, free birth control to the population that's considered unfit, or segregation. So my first question is, how do you decide who's fit and who's not fit? Because in eugenics, they presuppose that there is a number of unfit people and there's a number of fit people. Now, how do you decide who's fit and who's not fit? So to answer that question, I'm going to give you some real criteria that have been used to differentiate whether someone's fit or unfit. So one would be if you've had a child with a mental or physical impairment, like if you've had a child with autism or Huntington's disease or a clubfoot or low IQ. That was proposed by Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger. She came up with a list of reasons why people shouldn't have children, and this is actually one of them. It says, when children already born are not normal even though both parents are in good physical and mental condition. So everyone likes to do personality tests, IQ tests. You can find them on the internet. You can find them in your magazines, men magazines, girly magazines. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that psychological testing was actually invented by the father of eugenics, Francis Galton. He actually invented these tests the psychological test to differentiate who would be in the fit pool and who would be in the unfit pool. Now, in the 1900s, people were sterilized, and one of the reasons they were sterilized is because of low IQ. So here's one more criteria: whether or not a parent has an inheritable disease. This one again comes from Margaret Sanger, and it says, children should not be born when either parent has an inheritable disease, such as insanity, feeble-mindedness, epilepsy, or syphilis. Now, my question is feeble-mindedness really an inheritable disease? And is feeble-mindedness a disease at all? Also, there's a debate still on how much of a factor genetics plays in mental disorders and how much of a factor the environment plays in mental disorders. So another criteria is if you have a history of mental illness in your family. Now, the reason I bring this up is for a couple of reasons. One, in modern China, if you have a history of mental illness in your family, you cannot have a child. Now, that doesn't mean if you have a history of mental illness. That means if your mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandparent, anyone in your family, if they have a history of mental illness, you cannot have a child. So the second reason I bring this up is because everyone knows about the Holocaust and all the people it killed in the gas chambers. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that this Nazi euthanasia program was actually started in a mental wards, in a program called Operation T4. I'm going to read this to you. Meticulous records discovered after the war documented 70,273 deaths by gassing at the 6 euthanasia centers between January 1940 and August 1941. Hitler ordered a halt to Operation T4 on August 24, 1941. Gas chambers from some of the euthanasia killing centers were dismantled and shipped to the exterminating camps in occupied Poland. So these euthanasia killing centers were actual psychiatric wards. Another criteria is criminal history. So that means if you have a history of criminality, you are put into this group of the unfit. I have something to read you. In 1907, the state of Indiana introduced a bill authorizing the compulsory sterilization of any confirmed criminal, idiot, rapist, or imbecile in a state institution whose condition was considered unimprovable by a panel of physicians. Eventually, 29 states had statutes permitting sterilization of the insane and feeble-minded, of which 12 also covered sterilization of criminals. So another criteria is, do you masturbate too often? Now, this question might seem funny or ridiculous, but in the early 1900s, people were actually sterilized because they masturbated too much. And in fact, the first person ever committed to a government psychiatric ward was a person who was diagnosed with dementia due to masturbating too much, and he died in the psych ward. So if you compulsively masturbate and you look at internet porn, you could be put into that group of unfit. And another criteria, are you homosexual? One of the groups Hitler sent to the gas chambers were homosexuals. That was my first question. How do you separate people into a fit group and into an unfit group? Now, these criterias were actual criterias that people would use to separate people into one group or another in the past, and even, in some cases, to this day. So here's my second question. Who should have a right to determine who's fit and who's unfit? So in the past, if you had physical problems, a doctor would do it. And if you had mental problems or a low IQ, the psychiatrist would do it. Or in the early 1900s in America, if you were poor, a social worker would do it. If you were a criminal, a judge would do it. And again, who should have the ability to determine whether or not someone's fit or unfit to have children? And should anyone have that right? And my last question is, do you personally believe that you would fit into the fit group or the unfit group? So my 3 questions are, how do you set apart the 2 groups of fit and unfit? Who should have the ability to tell someone's unfit or fit? And are you fit or unfit? So you may have watched this video and thought to yourself, this is all in the past. Eugenics is pseudoscience. It's not being done anymore. Well, it is, even in the United States. But this is a topic I'll be talking about in another video, so you may want to subscribe. In a future video, I'll be answering the question, what does eugenics have to do with Planned Parenthood? Right now I'm going to read you a quote. The campaign for birth control is not merely of eugenic value, but is practically identical in ideal with the final aims of eugenics. The most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the overfertility of the mental and physically defective. And that quote comes from Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. So please subscribe and I'll see you next time.
For more great videos like this one, check out the Psychetruth channel on YouTube.